This Saturday is the return of Conor McGregor, UFC 246, the main event. Cowboy Cerrone will be stepping up to the plate to see what happens when Conor McGregor comes back. His first fight since losing at UFC 229 to Khabib Nurmagomedov. The question I would like to start off with, Brian, I actually pitch it to you first. Sometimes I like to go first. Sometimes I want to pitch it to you. Based on everything we have seen pre-fight, and we had a conversation about this yesterday, maybe you disagree, but I saw Chuck Mindenhall, our trusty Steve here on the show, he was saying it feels like the sneakiest fight week in McGregor history. I tend to agree. But based on everything you have heard from Conor or people say about Conor who are somewhat in the know, what kind of Conor are you expecting? Do you believe that the King is back? What have you been able to ascertain, given the amount of information that has been out there?
I believe we're going to get the closest thing to the King being back at 31 years old, coming off of such a long layoff, which does disaster to the idea of the kind of fighter he is. Somebody who relies on technique, rhythm, timing, and needs to be busy. Why was he so unbelievable in 2015 and 16? He fought 3 times both years, and he was sharp, and he was ready, and he was there. Taking off the kind of break that he did, 1 fight in 3 years, certainly no matter what you think about UFC 229, that's not 100% prime Conor. And that's sort of been the theme heading into this fight. Is the King back? I don't know if the King can ever be the King again. That's something that can really only be answered not just Saturday night, but the next few fights, especially if he can fight 3 times this year, which is his goal. But I think if you can gain anything from tone, and I'm really pointing at that MacLife interview, yes, it's an in-house interview, but you really got a first chance to get up close and personal with him. Something to you're in Chuck's point of why this fight may not have this feeling of buzz as if like a ship's about to crash into us. Well, they didn't do a public press conference, right? They didn't do any kind of media tours, maybe because of the sexual assault stuff. So coming so close to the holidays, it's kind of just parachuted in right now. It's going to be massive fight night. It's probably going to do monster business. All of our websites that cover it are going to do monster business.
Sure.
But the idea of can the King still be the King? I have liked what I've heard from him. I have liked the chutzpah coming out of him. If I can say one thing about the build to 229, it was unlike any other fight build we'd ever seen because of the Dolly incident in April in Brooklyn. It became instantly a grudge match of a nasty level that we'd never seen. We knew it had skyrocket potential to break the pay-per-view record. It did. Only fight in MMA history to go 2 million buys on pay-per-view. But it was and I'm specifically referring to Conor in that Radio City Music Hall with Khabib, it was just a 0 to 60 Conor. It was like a go for the throat in every comment Conor, go after everything. It wasn't that full-on confident showboating Conor from the Aldo build, from the first Diaz build. I think I'm hearing a little bit more of that. And if you want to do cut and paste math and you're hearing John Kavanaugh and them say, look, we've never seen him this dialed in a while, and you hear Conor being honest about the potential disaster that was that Khabib camp, if you put all of that together and he can be the best version that he can be at 31 coming off a break, we could see a big year coming for Conor McGregor that starts on Saturday night.
I mean, I'm of a few different minds on this. I mean, the one hand, I've talked about it before, people always have these questions. How good is Conor striking? How good is his ground game? You talk to his critics, they'll tell you he's some kind of fraud who has pulled a magician's trick on everybody. You talk to his camp, his inner circle, and they make him sound like he's a North Korean dictator. He gets 18 holes in one, 18 holes in a row, right? So it's very hard to get an understanding of things. But here's what I would say in terms of the good side of what I've heard. I did not like the suggestion from his longtime head trainer, John Kavanaugh, that Conor is essentially running his camp. And I've talked to some folks over in Ireland, and they kind of tell me that's been the case maybe for a little while, so it may not be new. And I'm not saying that will cost him against Cerrone. I just think against elite opposition consistently over time, eventually that might bite you in the ass. So that part wasn't great. But I'll tell you what, at 170, there are some interesting questions that we'll assess here in just a second. But I like that he is not trying to be the old thing that he was. To me, maybe if he beats Cerrone, he will come out there and he will just say, okay, let's dust off.
He's humbled. He's legitimately humbled,
right,
and that's why.
Right, but that's a good thing, I think. Yeah. He may go out and beat Cerrone and then dust off the old material, in which case we're back to where we were. And I do think he reserves animosity for the Khabibs of the world. Maybe Justin Gaethje's, maybe Masvidal's. I guess we'll have to see Nate as well. Who knows? But in the case of Cerrone, I'm liking what I'm hearing in the sense that it seems very planned. It seems very thoughtful. We talked about it when it was a Justin choice or a Cerrone choice. What was the right fight for him to take at that juncture? The Cerrone fight, I think, is the better one. everyone has been kind of alarmed by Conor that he's been reserved. I have to tell you, I am heartened by that, but here's the even better news. Let's assume for just a second, Brian Campbell, that the peak Conor McGregor was UFC 205 against Eddie Alvarez.
Yes.
I think that's the best I've ever seen him. Maybe you disagree. Do you think that's the best you've ever seen Conor? The 13 seconds against Aldo was hard to say.
I talk about the Conor magic a lot.
Yeah.
The jar was full at that point. You felt like he could accomplish anything.
No, but imagine you didn't know anything about him and you just watched that fight. You'd walk away unbelievably impressed. If that guy shows up, or a version of at 170 of that guy, Cerrone has no chance. I think the good news for Conor fans is you can get a guy, I think, 1 or 2 steps below that, and not because Cerrone is some chump, but because the wind is at Conor's back stylistically, that this is just the right opportunity to get back there. And his focus, he said before, was achieving certain benchmarks. I want to get this amount of money. I want to get these titles. The new benchmark is absolute, unequivocal, let's wring the sponge dry. How good can I actually be? I don't even think he needs to go for that goal, but if that's your North Star, you can be a little bit less because of the time off and still get the win. I'll say this. The good news is Conor should win. The bad news is if he doesn't, I think it's absolutely disastrous for his career.
Absolutely. I think the new benchmark is, in my mind, actually starting and creating a legitimate second chapter to his career. So what does that mean? If he loses this fight, we can get into what would be at stake and what would happen next and all that. But he's certainly at a weird spot. Only 31 years old, not that far removed from his physical prime, didn't take a lot of damage the last few years, yet at the same time, he's not that far from becoming full-time celebrity fighter. He's not that far from us going, well, he's one-dimensional now. He's always been one-dimensional. Yeah, he had that run where the magic was great and he was consistent, but now let's just cash him out a few times and let's see him go. He's at that sort of seesaw moment where it's like, which path are you going to go? He could end up becoming legitimately one of the all-time greats, and to do that, you have to have a second chapter. Look at a guy like Randy Couture, who was able to sort of reinvent and create different roads at different weight classes or suffer a couple defeats, but come back. This is why this fight in this year is going to be so damn compelling for Conor, because he's really got to figure out, it's not piece of the ownership in the UFC. You're not getting that, brother, all right? You were top of the mountain 3 years ago, the last time we saw you fight. Now I think it's more about, can he get back to being a legitimate title contender, given how much MMA has evolved and changed while he's been gone,
right,
and potentially doing that at 170. Now, I told you that I liked the bombastic side, the confidence that I'm seeing coming out of him. It's not overly over the top, as we talked about. He's humbled. There's a little bit of stuff in there that's more just talk to pump himself up. Him relapsing over the Khabib fight and showing you round by round, well, I was winning this round, and he only did this.
His assessment of what was going on seems a little bit off.
That's off, but I think to a certain degree, any fighter has to be a con man to themselves to talk them into sort of the confidence that you need to go in there and perform.
Just to push back on that, if I may, did you ever hear GSP do that? I never heard him do that.
Oh, I'm not sitting here and telling you that this is the best move for Conor. I'm saying this is kind of how he works, and it doesn't scare me as much. The thing that potentially scares me is that he's sprinkling on top the idea of, look, I want Khabib, I want to get back in that title line at 155, but if that doesn't happen, I'll go up there and take the 170 title.
Right.
I think there's a difference between when he used to do that, when Tyron Woodley was champion and it got in his face because he is so high on top of the mountain back then, Mystic Mac to the gills, that he can talk trash to anybody and talk himself into believing that he can do it. But in your early 30s, when you're this one-dimensional, do you really want to be talking that confidently publicly about going in there and knocking out Usman and dealing with those wrestlers? I don't know if that's the smart move in the angle to go to, but if he is going to have a legitimate second chapter in his career that begins this year, he's going to have to figure out who he is as a fighter 3-4 years removed from when he would just walk people down and get them out with one punch, and can he become more well-rounded? Can he prove to us that he can be a legitimate 170-pound fighter?
So here's the thing for me. It's like, if you look at Mayweather, why was Mayweather able to take really long breaks in his career? Because he was so far ahead of everyone else, it just didn't matter. He could literally kick his feet up, let the game keep going, decide he wants to make another 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 mil, and then come back and just mollywop somebody. Now, again, towards the end of his career, we all know he got a little bit selective about the timing of the opposition to a degree.
Well, he's always been selective, let's be honest.
Okay, but fair enough. But he fought tough guys. All right, but the point being is this. You have seen the very, very, very best ones in MMA do that. Your John Jones, who dominated the last decade. Your GSP, who for the most part, outside that 4-year sabbatical, he could take a 4-year sabbatical, come back and still win the middleweight title against Michael Bisping. Those guys are able to take time off and still achieve pretty remarkable things. The question has always been, is Conor really that good, or was he just on a hot streak? Here's the interesting part for me about 170. First of all, or even 155, we're going to find out exactly which Conor is here. Now, is it a new Conor? Is it the old Conor? Is the new Conor better than the old Conor? Is he much worse? I don't know what the answer to that is. But to me, when he says, well, yeah, if I can get the 155 title, great. If not, I'm just going to go to 170. On the one hand, I like the fact that he's giving himself options. On the other hand, there used to be this fun and magical tension between his imagination and your own skepticism.
That's a great way to say it.
Right? And now that tension's more like just skepticism. You're like, 170, Kamaru Usman? Are you shitting me? Now you're most like, dude, you're sounding delusional. He always did, but you're always like, but every time I doubt him, he's wrong. It's a similar kind of setup, but with different mechanics operating, I think, internally in the fan base as well as among the media. So if he can go and achieve great heights, he's got great obstacles in front of him that will enable him to do that. But it also feels like before I doubted his delusion and I paid for it. Now I'm like, I feel much more secure in being sure of some of the heights of his delusion.
And that's why this fight is where he is in our eyes is such a trapeze act for him. It could go either way. I'm wrong. When I originally said you're doing this Cowboy fight now when he's coming off 2 losses, it could have been so much bigger if you did it last year when Dad Cowboy was rising and trying to get that elusive title shot. I think it's actually better now because you can talk me into 50-50, you can talk me into either direction. Conor's going to walk out there and knock him out in the first minute, or Conor's going to get exposed because it's the wrong tough guy when you're one-dimensional and you haven't been around in a while and you have a historically questionable gas tank outside of that one fight at UFC 202. Mm-hmm. In either direction, the extremes, I would 100% buy in if you told me that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's such a precarious spot. Yeah, star power fights. Look, for whether he loses his next 6 fights, every time he fights, we're going to watch it, just like we watched the tail end of the Mike Tyson run when it was just a complete circus sideshow. But he also has a chance to get back in line and prove he can have a second career. I mean, the great ones, the Alis, right? They constantly were able to reinvent.
Yep.
We're really at that precarious moment. It's theater, man.
Right.
It's the perfect kind of theater.
Right. Is he an all-time great, or was he just a guy who was good at one time? Right.